12 Sinister Legends Revealed, the terrifying truths haunting Nevada's cursed land. Clara had barely stepped foot in Goldfear, Nevada, and already the town felt like a trap. She clutched her son Jake's hand tightly, not because they were crossing the street, but because a shiver crawled down her spine. This was not merely an ordinary town. It was the kind of place where disappearances echoed through the years, where laughter faded with the sunset, and shadows felt like they were sneering, watching. The ligature of her grandmother's house wrapped around Clara like a noose. The old wood creaked ominously. The peeling wallpaper seemed to whisper her name in the dead of night, and the air was thick with ghosts of bitter memories. Jake, always so lively, now seemed cautious, his eyes darting, sensing unexplainable dangers that lurked at the corners of their new existence. It wasn't long before the townspeople began sharing ghostly tales, stories steeped in dread. 12 had vanished over the years, consumed by a curse, they said. And those words snaked their way into her mind, festering. Evenings filled with warmth soon veiled discomfort. Clara caught hesitation in Jake's gaze as the sun slipped below the horizon, an unsettling tension stretching through the air. He talked in his sleep, muttering bizarre warnings about masked figures flitting through the shadows, claiming they weren't alone, that the ground pulses, he'd say, wringing his hands. Each night, Clara felt a chill creep deeper into her bones, leaving her heart racing and sweat glistening on her brow. Shaking off her unease, Clara had visited the sheriff, hoping to alleviate her concerns. She found him a ghost of the boy she'd once known, the same gruff voice but haunted eyes that darted away every time she mentioned Jake's restless nights. Was it her imagination, or did the walls seem to close in around her? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Even as Clara found moments of warmth in their shared laughter, the web of limiting fears tightened around them. Hushed conversations rippled through the local diner every time she brought up the 12 disappearances. Those whom she thought friendly turned cold and wary, their eyes darkened with a knowing dread. Like sheep caught in a wolf's gaze, they were forced to navigate through the chilling history of Goldfear, revealing terrifying secrets stitched into the fabric of town life.
The basement reeked of mildew and decay, the kind of scent that buried hope. Clara pressed on, guided only by the flickers of the light and the pitiful whimpering that crescendoed from the shadows. As she reached the bottom step, the dimness thickened, wrapping around her like fog, choking her with its weight. Her heart raced, pounding a frantic rhythm as she squinted into the dark. Was the air moving? She could feel something brushing against her skin, subtle yet menacing. And then, there it was, a small figure huddled in the corner, shivering. Clara felt a jolt of terror, followed by overwhelming relief. Jake! She rushed forward, only to freeze when she noticed his face, pale and drawn, his eyes wide with terror, staring past her into the darkness. "No, Mommy, don't look!" Jake shrieked, scrambling backward, his tiny hands up in defense, as if to ward off an unseen foe. Something stirred behind Clara, moving closer. She could feel it, a slow, unnatural breathing, hot against her neck, heavy with malice. She turned her head, just a fraction, but the sight sent her mind spiraling into madness. Shapes materialized from the dark, draped in tattered rags that seemed to writhe with intention. Their hollow eyes locked onto her with a hunger that froze her blood. A cacophony of muffled whispers filled the basement, words she couldn't understand, but the tones spoke volumes of despair, a chorus of those long lost. The realization crept into her mind like ice. Were these the 12th victims, bound to this cursed land, forever condemned? Clara felt the weight of the room crashing down, pressing against her. Fear wove through her veins, urging her to flee. But where? There was no escape, and she could not abandon Jake. As she turned back to her son, she caught a glimpse of something crawling toward him, something that was not of this world. The ground beneath her surged with a pulsating energy, a sinister heartbeat echoing in her skull. The walls seemed to moan in response, responsive to the dark figures weaving around her. Would they add Clara and Jake to their twisted history? "No, we have to get out," she screamed, grasping Jake's hand tightly. But as she pulled him toward the stairs, the shadows closed around them, hungry for their screams. Clara's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan, but as the figures advanced, a terrible thought struck. Could they be the key to breaking the curse? If they needed a 13th, would it claim them both? The shadows lunged forward as Clara turned to flee. Another scream rent the air, but this one felt different. It was the sound of despair and acceptance. Clara's spirit collapsed under the weight of realization. What price must she pay to escape this nightmare? Would she too be bound to gold fear, damned to join the haunting chorus? "What do you want from us?" she shouted, stumbling backward into Jake. Around them, answers coiled like smoke, shapes blurred and twisted, the darkness beckoning closer. The price of survival loomed, and the world faded to black. The darkness shuddered and tightened its grip, squeezing every ounce of light from the room as Clara clutched Jake's small hand. She could feel the icy tendrils of fear creeping up her spine, their whispers pervading her thoughts. "What do you want from us?" she shouted again, her voice trembling, but the shadows responded only with a smothering silence that threatened to drown her. The figures shifted, each movement slow and deliberate, swirling just outside the fraying edge of the light. Jake squeezed her hand tighter, his eyes wide, reflecting the raw terror that twisted her gut. "Mommy, we have to go," he pleaded, his voice a raw whisper almost lost in the oppressive hush. "Just hold on to me," Clara urged, dragging him toward the stairs. The moment she stepped back, the shadows lunged as if they were alive, hungry mouths opening in silence, eager to feast on her fear. She could sense their rancid breath on her skin, each exhale chilling her bones. Suddenly, a distant lull filled the air, a lull that pulled at her sanity. The floor undulated beneath her feet. The sound of laughter, soft and mocking, echoed through the basement. It was the laughter of children, mingled with the piercing wails of the lost. "Let's go!" Clara jerked Jake along, almost sliding down the last few steps. Her pulse racing, but they froze at the second-to-last stair. A ghastly figure arose, its shape melting into the light, revealing a face twisted in an eternal grimace of despair. A visage that blurred between human and something horrifically otherworldly. 13th, it whispered, its voice a throaty rasp that sent flesh-crawling chills racing through Clara. "Become one with us." "No, we are not yours," Clara cried, swallowing the bile rising in her throat. She pulled Jake closer, shielding him with her body. Their collective fear created a shield, distorting the shadows that twisted around them, but just barely. The figures hissed like steam, their bodies hovering just outside the dim aura of the flickering bulb. Clara felt their emptiness, a void that tugged at her very essence. "We want your acceptance," the figures hissed, "to become part of our story, our endless cycle." The basement walls began to pulse as if alive, vibrating with the stories of the lost. Clara could see shadows flicker behind the figures, a tableau of past victims stretching back in time, their stories melding into a singular, suffocating wail. "Run, Clara!" Jake screamed, jolting her from the trance of horror. With sudden clarity, she turned, gripping his hand with a fierce determination, and they bolted up the stairs. Their footsteps echoed, punctuated by the haunting calls from behind. "You cannot escape the story. You will join us." The voices surged, drowning in a cacophony that clawed at her sanity. Reaching the top, she raced toward the door, heart pounding like a war drum.
It was almost ajar, an inviting sliver of light in the oppressive night. With one final push, Clara flung it open, breaking through into the fresh air. She stumbled onto the grass, pulling Jake with her into the cool night, illuminated by the moon's pale glow. But the freedom felt hollow. Gasping in the newfound freshness, Clara turned back just in time to see the door slam shut hard behind them, an echo of finality reverberating through the stillness. "Mommy, they're still coming. What do we do?" Jake pressed to her side, his eyes wide with terror. Clara stood paralyzed, breathing hard, scanning the darkness around the house, feeling eyes watching them. What had they unleashed? Would they be pursued forever? Would the curse follow them into the light? A shadow broke free from the house's edge, a silhouette looming larger, darker, and hungering. Clara felt her throat constrict as she pulled Jake closer, silent and lost in panic. "What's next?" she whispered to herself, staring at the oncoming threat. But with chilling certainty, the answer loomed. The story had only begun. Clara's breath fogged in the chilling night air as she stood at the edge of the glassy lawn, frozen in place. The figure loomed closer, shadows flaring around it like a cloak, each step a purposeful echo of dread. Her heart hammered in her chest. She had never known terror like this, and every instinct screamed at her to run again. But where could they go? The open fields felt as terrifying as the shadows lurking behind. "Mommy," Jake whimpered, tugging at her sleeve, "I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. Surely she could feel the weight of the darkness pressing against her skin, as if it was tasting her despair. The looming figure paused a few feet away, its edges shifting, swirling like smoke caught in a breeze. Clara's hands trembled as she pulled Jake against her. The boy's warm body was a reminder of the life they were clinging to. The air around them thickened, charged with unnatural energy. "Do you really think you're free?" came a voice from the shadows, silky and serpentine. Clara's stomach dropped as the voice came from the figure. It was both mocking and hungry. "The story follows you now. It knows your fears. It thrives on your pain." "No, it can't," she stammered, the flicker of hope within her waning. How could something so vile hold power over them? A sudden rumble broke the silence, the ground beneath them trembling as if the very earth was responding to that hideous laughter. Shadows surged, churning around Clara and Jake like a violent ocean, each shadow twisting into a grotesque shape that bore the faces of the lost. The laughter twisted into sorrowful wails, and Clara's grip tightened around Jake, shielding him from the horror surrounding them. "Mommy, look," Jake pointed, his finger quaking as he gestured toward a tree nearby, its branches silhouetted starkly against the moonlight.
Among its tangled limbs, shadows danced, mocking her with familiar shapes. Clara's blood ran cold. They're people! But the figures weren't people. They were echoes of lives swallowed by this cursed land, spirits now shackled to the narrative of the malevolent menace they faced. The shadows swirled, crafting a semblance of each one. A woman with pleading eyes, a child with outstretched hands, faces of despair embedded in the void. "Join us," the wretched voice echoed, and with the words came a wave of despair that swallowed Clara whole. The terror seeped into her bones. "Become part of the tale. Accept your fate." "No, we won't!" Clara shouted, fighting against the terror gripping her. Fear clawed at her throat, but she pushed it down fiercely. They had escaped the basement. They had fought their way free. They could face this, too. "Run!" she ordered, yanking Jake away from the swirling mass of shadows. They sprinted, each step dragging them further away from the clutches of the dark. The grass was damp, slick against their feet, but freedom tasted sweet, and the moonlight guided them. But the shadows swirled tighter, twisting, ripping through the air, chasing them with relentless fury. "You cannot hide," they chanted, the words slithering around Clara like vines. The trees loomed as they ran into the thicket at the edge of the yard, branches clawing at them. The sound of rustling leaves felt alive, as if everything around them was part of the dark story unfolding. "Where do we go, Mommy?" Jake's voice trembled as he stumbled over roots clinging to the earth. "Just keep running," she cried, pushing forward as fear bubbled in her chest. What if the stories they had escaped were just beginning to ensnare them again? They broke through the thicket, and ahead lay the dirt road, illuminated faintly by an overhead streetlight. "There!" Clara pointed, hope breaking through the terror. But the moment they stepped onto the road, the light flickered ominously. The shadows continued to curl around the edges, refusing to let go. "You can't leave. Your acceptance is integral to our tale," the echoes wailed, the voices shifting in and out of comprehension, wrapping them in dread. For a heartbeat, Clara stood on the edge of the road, grappling with an urge to look back. The horror loomed larger behind them. "Don't look!" she yelled, pulling Jake under her wing. But a crack echoed from the ground, a fissure opening wide, unyielding, revealing the darkness below, pulling at her feet. The instinct to flee clashed violently against a pull to look back. "Mommy!" Jake screamed, the ground quaking beneath them. Clara gasped, her heart racing. One choice, one moment. As the abyss widened, she clutched Jake, and the shadows seemed to hiss in triumph. All stories must end. The finality rolled through the darkness, and Clara's vision blurred. She braced for what came next, the choice before her. What awaits on the other side of fear? The tale was far from over, and they were still trapped, sailing toward an unknown harbor of nightmares. With a surge of adrenaline, Clara plunged forward, dragging Jake along as the ground quaked beneath them. The chasm of darkness beckoned, a void that threatened to swallow them whole. Each step felt like a race against time, the howling shadows reaching eagerly for them. "We have to keep going," she urged, her voice strained and desperate. The road stretched out like a narrow thread, a pale lifeline against the consuming fog. Behind them, the ground continued to split, a jagged maw of nothingness that yearned to pull them in. Clara didn't look back, but she could hear the shadows screaming, their lamenting cries a twisted melody of despair. The more they ran, the closer the voices came. "Mommy, I can't!" Jake gasped, his legs stumbling over the rough terrain. Clara felt her heart leap into her throat. She couldn't lose him now, not when the darkness was so close.
"Just a little further, sweetheart, please." But the urgency of her words felt hollow against the real terror behind them. The road grew crooked, leading them away from the safety of the streetlight's glow. Clara's breath quickened as she glanced sidelong, a flicker of movement catching her eye. Shadows danced along the edges of their vision, flickering like moths to a flame. Were they becoming part of the story now? The whispering grew louder, more insistent. "You can't escape us. You're part of the narrative." The voices wove a spell around her, tinged with a frightful allure that made her pulse race. Jake whimpered, pressing against her leg, a tiny anchor to reality. Then a sudden chill swept over her, a sensation of icy fingers trailing down her spine. "We have to find shelter," she shouted, spotting a crumbling cottage just off the road, its door ajar like a gaping mouth. Desperation propelled her forward, her instincts screaming that they could hide, just for a moment. They dove inside, the door creaking ominously behind them. The stale air filled her lungs like the smell of decay. "Mommy, it's dark," Jake whimpered, his small hands trembling in the shadows. "Shh, it's okay," Clara whispered, scanning the darkened interior. The room was filled with dusty cobwebs and forgotten belongings. An old rocking chair in the corner creaked slightly, though no one was there to make it move. They squeezed into a corner, hearts racing, listening to the frantic rustling outside. The atmosphere felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were breathing, waiting for them to make a noise. Clara could barely hear the shadows. They seemed to whisper to each other just outside. She pressed her ear against the splintered wood of the window frame, straining to catch fragments of their nightmarish chorus. "A mother and her child, they belong to us." The words slithered through her mind like a serpent, wrapping around her thoughts, spreading doubt. What if the stories were true? What if they were indeed trapped, destined to haunt this place forever? "Mommy?" Jake's voice broke her reverie, trembling with fear. "What if they find us?" Clara's heart clenched painfully. "We'll find a way out, I promise." But suddenly, the rocking chair started to move on its own, creaking backwards and forwards, an echo from some terrible past. "Join us," a voice cooed softly from behind it. Clara's heart nearly stopped. Shadows flitted at the edges of the room, whispering her name, curling around her like ivy. "Jake, we have to leave," Clara hissed, pulling him close. The shadows thickened, seeping into the cottage like a fog rolling over a marsh. They pushed against her skin, an unholy touch that sent a shock of cold terror through her veins. As they burst from the cottage into the night, the world outside had shifted. The shadows were no longer just behind them. They were swirling along the path ahead, forming grotesque shapes that twisted and writhed, faces peering through the darkness. Clara's resolve hardened. They had fought their way out before. "We'll figure this out," she whispered fiercely to Jake. But the shadows fluttered and gnawed at her thoughts, relentless. "You will remember who you are. You are ours," they sang, a melody laced with madness. And then a shattering thought struck her. What if they weren't the only ones trapped here? What if there was a curse weaving their stories together, and they were just branches on a dark tree, rooted in despair? Jake pulled at her sleeve, eyes wide. "Mommy, what's happening?" As Clara looked into the abyss ahead, her skin crawled with fear. The answer loomed like a spectral fog, inching closer. "You'll find out soon enough," a voice whispered, just as the wind began to howl. Clara's breaths came in rapid gasps as fear fueled her every step. They sprinted along the path, shadows clawing at their heels like hungry beasts. Something inside her urged her to search for an escape, but the dark pulsations of dread made every option feel unthinkable. "Look, Mommy!" Jake cried, suddenly pointing ahead. Clara squinted into the gloam, the contours of a dilapidated fence emerging from the haze, sagging like a broken wing. Beyond it, weathered tombstones loomed, gravestones standing like sentinels in the dark, guarding secrets better left buried. "No!" Clara shouted, turning his body away before he could take a step closer. "We can't go near there." But the shadows were insistent. They swirled closer, merging with the fog thicker than a wool blanket. It pressed down on her, stifling and suffocating. Still, something compelled her forward. Were the whispers drawing her in? "Join us. It's only right." The voices were seductive, promising a twisted kind of belonging that sent shivers skittering down her spine. "Mommy, please!" Jake whimpered, tugging at her. His small frame was trembling, pulled between the shadows and the will to flee.
"Keep close," Clara breathed, feeling an odd pull toward the gravestones, each inscription hinting at forgotten lives. She shoved the urge down hard, choosing to lead him along the path. Was this madness? So much had changed in an instant. She had to protect Jake. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the air, a chilling sound like gravel rolling over bone. Clara halted, her heart racing, as the shadows round them drew together, slithering toward a shape. It emerged, a dark figure bound in layers of tattered cloth and flickering images of faces that seemed almost human. "Don't leave us," it beckoned in a crooning voice, a fusion of temptation and sorrow. "Run!" Clara screamed, grabbing Jake's hand. But as they tore away across the uneven ground, she sensed something unraveling behind them, a dark tapestry of threads swiftly weaving to catch them. "Why won't you stay?" The voice ebbed, tender, laced with malice, beckoning. "You belong, all of you." A crack of thunder boomed overhead, startling Clara into a sprint. Lightning flashed, illuminating the path momentarily. Shadows flickered, revealing mouths, eyes, and twisted hands. "You can't run from us!" they shrieked, blending together in a cacophony of anguish and fury. Their footsteps fell heavier as the ground pushed back, resisting their escape. Just when they thought they'd made distance, Clara stumbled, fingers clawing at the anchor of Jake's arm. She yanked him forward as anguish rose. "We can't stop! We won't stop!" Panic clawed at Clara's throat. With every glance backward, the shadows surged closer, their chilling breath brushing against her neck, promising transformation. There, at the edge of the graveyard, a flicker of light shone path. Not a street light, but a glimmer, a fleeting hope, or another trap? "Mommy!" Jake's voice cracked, bloodless and hushed. "Keep your eyes on me. Just don't look away," Clara said, her voice trembling but fierce. Every ounce of her wanted to flee the darkness, but she knew she could not let Jake slip from her grasp. As they pushed toward the light, it flickered ominously. Just then, the shadows lunged, a tidal wave of dark energy engulfing them. Clara's breath hitched, heart pounding as she felt the pull of the void around her, a force beyond comprehension. Was this the end, or a beginning she wasn't ready to face? Just as it felt like the darkness would consume them, the whispers morphed into a frantic chant of names. Her name, Jake's name, past lives intertwining. "Join us, Together forever. In that moment, the true horror descended. All she could do was clutch onto Jake tighter, floating between terror and hope. And the light remained, just out of reach, tantalizing and elusive. "What if," Clara murmured, as they stepped into the unknown, "what if there's no way back?" With that thought hanging heavy in her heart, the shadows surged, and she braced herself for their answer. The darkness tightened its grip, squeezing the air from Clara's lungs.
Time blurred as whispers swirled around them, echoing off the trees like a tempest of lost souls. The shadows enveloped her and Jake as if every twisted voice was reaching for their very essence. She could feel Jake's tiny hand trembling in hers, fear radiating from him like static electricity. The light flickered again, brighter this time. "Just a bit closer," Clara urged, shoving through the thickening fog as panic clawed at her throat. As they stumbled forward, she could see forms gathering, shapes swirling with the shadows, faces distorted in agony. This is it, she thought, a point of no return. A sudden chill washed over her, brisk like frost creeping over exposed skin. "Mommy!" Jake cried, the fear in his voice crystallizing her resolve. She could see the outline of a doorway glowing, but it flickered like a candle caught in a draft. The entity that had beckoned them before slithered back into view, its features now clearer under the intermittent light. A face marred by sorrow and hollow eyes. "Why do you resist?" it asked, voice dripping with an otherworldly allure. "You are chosen." Clara's heart thudded heavily in her chest, resonating with primal instincts. "We aren't chosen, we're not like you," she yelled as the shadowed figure advanced, each step pulling the darkness closer, ready to swallow them whole. "Stay with us, Clara. Jake," it crooned, the words slicing through her, dredging up memories of laughter and safety, but tainted by an unsettling certainty that reverberated through her being. The figure stretched his hand, a twisted amalgamation of fingers that beckoned with an insatiable hunger for connection. "No!" Clara gasped, dragging Jake backward, away from the reach of those horrible grasping hands. Thunder cracked overhead, a tumult of nature rallying against their plight, scattering the gleam of light just ahead. But the atmosphere surged with spirit, rippling like boiling water. Clara glanced over her shoulder. The shadows churned in fury, writhing like angry snakes, ready to strike. "We have to go." She surged forward, grabbing Jake tightly as they raced toward the doorframe, now pulsating like a beating heart. It felt like a relic, a portal to salvation, though a whisper of doubt rustled through her. Could this light truly lead to safety, or was it just another trick? Jake stumbled, his small feet catching on roots that clawed through the forgotten ground. "Mommy, I'm scared," he whimpered, scrambling to her side. Tears welled in her eyes, an intense mix of fear and love coursing through her veins. "I am too, honey, but I promise I won't let anything happen to you." As they broke through the threshold, a powerful wind whipped around them, almost knocking Clara off her feet. The figure screamed in outrage, wailing as the light surged, enveloping Jake and Clara in a sphere of warmth. But warmth turned cold in an instant.
"But we're not like them, and we'll find a way out of this." "But we're not like them, and we'll find a way out of this." Half-dreamed visions of escape flickered in the periphery, the faint glimmers of light. Each one beckoned, but it was a treacherous call, tainted by the wails of the lost. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as she urged Jake forward, impulsively moving toward a flickering glow just beyond the thrumming shadow line. "Look!" Clara pointed, her voice rising above the haunting noise as her eyes caught a semblance of hope, a doorway carved of shimmering light. The path wriggled with fear, but she clutched Jake's hand tightly. "Just stay with me. Hold on." The shadows whispered louder, anger growing, intertwining with desperation. "Come back. Don't leave, Clara," they hissed. Her resolve began to falter, wrestling against the magnetic pull of their voices. "Please, don't listen," she cried, squeezing Jake's hand harder. But his grip was loosening. She could feel it, and panic rose in her throat. "Clara, what if they're right? What if we belong here?" Jake's eyes shimmered with uncertainty, innocence and fear weaving together. "Jake, we belong together. You, me, not here with them." As if summoned by her despair, the shadows surged, dark currents swallowing the dimness around them. Clara glanced back, the now distant figures clawing for them, desperation etched into each contorted face. She could feel their hunger, their desire to steal away what little light still existed in her heart. She forced herself to focus on the glow ahead, its warmth radiating like a siren's call. The air thickened further, constricting her chest, yet she would not let fear sink its claws into her. "Mommy," Jake whimpered. "No, we can do this," she shouted, pulling him closer, even as foreboding shadows churned. She felt them encircling, their power seeping into her mind, sowing seeds of doubt. "We have to move," she hissed, urgency igniting a fire within her. She couldn't falter. They were so close. Then panic struck her heart as Jake tripped, falling towards the roiling shadows that seemed eager to consume him. "Jake!" she screamed, lunging forward, the world spinning as she focused all of her strength to pull him back. The moment her fingers wrapped around his arm, the darkness coiled tighter, tightening its grasp around both of them. "Join us! You stir the dead!" The chorus of voices crescendoed, a symphony of fury that rattled Clara's senses. "Run!" she screamed, her throat raw. Energized by fear, she pulled Jake to his feet. Their path toward the light felt impossibly far, every step pulling them deeper into the maw of despair. Just as they reached the edge of the glow, the shadows writhed in anger, stretching to claim them. Clara thrust her hand toward the light, and in that moment it dimmed, flickering as if caught in a battle of wills. The ground beneath them shuddered, and a chasm opened. Screams erupted from the shadows, relentless and haunting. Clara felt the pull, the sheer force of hopelessness dragging at her heels. "Hang on, Jake!" Clara screamed, her heart pounding harder than before. She could sense that they were seconds away from losing everything. As she stepped closer to the light, a wild thought crossed her mind. What if she didn't just pull Jake to safety? What if they had to do something else? Just then, a new voice, deep and unseen, thundered from behind, shaking the ground. "You cannot escape!" With that, the light flickered one last time, dimming entirely. She felt Jake's hand slip, the comforting grip vanishing into nothingness, and Clara's heart dropped. Where was he? Light, shadow, despair, all intertwined as she screamed for him, dread replacing hope. The hell around them murmured, waiting for the moment she might break. What awaited in the darkness? Had they truly escaped, or merely traded one torment for another? Clara stumbled, the void swallowing her cries as she spun in the dark, frantic. Panic coursed through her veins, a deadly cocktail of fear and desperation. "Jake!" she shouted again, her voice echoing into the abyss. It was met with chilling silence. Her heart raced as she took a step back, wanting to run toward the light, a soft glow that felt like a memory now, slipping through her grasp. Adrenaline surged, urging her to move, to flee. But where? The shadows loomed around her, twisting and curling like smoke, seeping into the very fabric of her mind, suffocating her thoughts. The whispers rose again, swirling inside her head like a tempest. They were clearer now, and each name they hissed burned with a dark familiarity. Clara, join us. Jake. Stop! She pressed her palms against her ears, but the sounds only grew louder. Desperate visions of twisted faces emerged from the dark, pulling her deeper into their despair. Clara staggered, feeling her footing slip away. "You can't escape, Clara," a voice rasped. It was hauntingly familiar, sending icy tendrils snaking down her spine. "Your child is ours." "No!" she screamed, shaking her head violently. "I won't let you take him!" Fueled by a fierce instinct, she lunged toward the direction she felt Jake had vanished. Each step felt heavier, as if the shadows were pulling at her limbs, trying to anchor her into their realm. The temperature dropped, breath curling into frosty mist. "Clara." Her heart stopped at the sound of Jake's voice, faint like a whisper carried by the wind. She turned, desperation carving her path as she followed the sound through the dark. "Jake!" Clara called, her voice cracking, ricocheting off unseen walls. There, a flicker of movement caught her eye. She rushed forward, a flickering glow cutting through the malevolence. Clara reached out instinctively, hoping her fingers would grasp warm, small ones. Instead, she felt the cold of emptiness, a reminder of how fragile hope had become. "Clara, help!" His voice was closer now, but warped, distorted by pain. "Jake!" Tears streamed down Clara's face as she pushed through the shadows, forcefully parting the dark like a desperate mother wolf. Her breath hitched as she stumbled upon a distorted mirror. Half glimpses of herself and Jake bonded together but twisted into grotesque versions, mouths opening into silent screams. "Don't get trapped in their lies!" The voice of a child, a different child, echoed suddenly, startling her. "You must choose!" Behind the mirror, shadows writhed as faces emerged, each one familiar, naming a past Clara had buried deep. "Come back! We were happy!" they pleaded, their voices dripping with false affection. "No! You're not real!" Clara shouted, willing herself to move forward despite the intangible pull. Yet doubt seeped in. Could she trust her own mind? Did the blissful moments of her past mask a deeper truth? "Join us! We can be whole again!" they whispered. The ground trembled, splintering beneath her, the chasm widening, threatening to swallow her whole. But this time, a glimmer of courage ignited in her chest. "No more!" she roared, facing the darkness as if it were a tangible foe. "I choose Jake!" A chilling howl erupted from the abyss as the shadows recoiled, the mirror shattering into 1,000 shards of inky black glass that echoed with terror. Clara took a step back, her determination forcing a path through the chaos. "Clara!" Jake's sob broke through the void, laced with a throaty gasp. With renewed purpose, she pressed forward, searching the darkness for her son. But as she surged ahead, the light shifted, revealing a new horror. Clutches of shadow entities encircled Jake, pulling him away, dismantling the thin fabric of hope that Clara had woven so desperately. "Help me, Mommy!" Jake's voice rang out, innocent and terrified. In that instant, Clara's heart clenched, racing against the ticking clock of despair. With a primal scream, she shouted, "I'm coming, Jake!" But as she sprinted, something flickered, a shift in the shadows that overshadowed her resolve. A prescient dread washed over her like ice-cold water. Could it be too late? Had the darkness already claimed him? A deafening silence enveloped the air, suffocating Clara as she reached for her son. But what awaited her in that cacophony of shadows? As suddenly as it began, everything froze. The flickering light dimmed violently, and Clara felt the world shatter around her. Who would she save in the end? The shadows fell silent, awaiting her choice. Clara stood at the precipice of darkness, the gravity of despair pulling her heart into a plunge. Breathless, she felt the shadows tightening around her like chains, each flicker of light growing dimmer against the echo of their whispers. "You cannot choose, Clara," they hissed, their voices weaving through the air like poison. But the quiet desperation of her son's cries reached her heart, a lifeline tangled in turmoil. "No!" She shook her head fiercely, denial rolling off her tongue like thunder. "I choose life! I choose Jake!" The determination surged within her, a fire igniting amidst the encroaching shadows. She felt the stirrings of hope, a shield against the flooding gloom. The darkness recoiled, a hesitant wave pulling back as though her declaration had carved a crack in its grasp. There was no turning back now. Driven by love, Clara sprinted forward, plunging deeper into the void, straining to hear her son's fragile plea above the symphony of shadows tugging at her mind. "Mommy!" Jake's voice rose, a beacon guiding her through despair. Then, just ahead, she spotted him, clutched by a thick fog of indistinct figures, the shadows swirling in a chaotic dance, grasping at his small frame. "Jake!" Clara cried, breaking through the thick mass of fear swirling around her. She surged forward, hands outstretched to grasp his, not only to pull him back, but to hold him, to let him know he was anchored amidst the chaos. The moment her fingers intertwined with his, an electric jolt surged through her, scattering the darkness like wisps of smoke. "Mommy, I was so scared!" Jake sobbed, his tiny body trembling beneath the extended clutch of the shadows still sifting through the air. Clara knelt, wrapping her arms around him, nestled against the shivers of his frail form. But those tendrils of darkness whispered. They twisted, forming shapes that writhed in agony and despair, beckoning them back. "No, I won't let you take him! Not now!" Clara yelled, the raw emotion pouring from her like a flood, drowning the whispers in her fierceness. She could see faces swimming through the dark, their expressions soaked in sorrow, those of the lost, each seeking solace within the realm of their torment. Yet Clara had found her strength. The shadows cringed at her defiance, retreating further into the thick fog as she steeled her will. "We can break this curse together," she declared firmly, standing tall amidst the swirling chaos surrounding them. But the resistance of the shadows felt like a living thing, a monstrous beast snarling in reply. "No one leaves! You're part of our story!" they screeched, a cacophony of voices rising in dissonance. "I refuse to be part of your narrative!" Clara roared, stepping forward, dragging Jake along as she broke through the last remnants of darkness. A path opened ahead, a flash of vibrant light amid the murky air, a doorway to freedom. Clara's hand tightened around Jake. "On 3, we run. 1, 2, 3!" They lunged forward, propelled by the raw intensity of love and the ferocity of survival. As they thundered toward the glimmering light, the shadows howled in rage, clawing desperately at their heels. "You will never be free!" they wailed, frustration twisting the melodies into fierce shrieks. But Clara could only force herself to run faster, her heart roaring with every thunderous beat. The warmth enveloped them like a hug, drowning their fears in a purging rush. Every ounce of darkness shrank back, and just before they collided with the light, Clara could feel the icy grip loosening from her soul. When they burst through the threshold, the light exploded into a kaleidoscope of colors swirling around them, illuminating their path like an explosion of stars.
The shadows bellowed, a frenzied storm swirling angrily behind them, but it was too late. Clara squeezed Jake tightly as they tumbled into the warmth. Suddenly, they emerged onto familiar ground, the porch of their old house, the moon hanging brightly above like a watchful guardian. The chill of fear faded away, replaced by something sweeter: life. Clara turned around, heart pounding, the shadows fading into the night behind them, their voices thinning to distant echoes. "Are we safe?" Jake asked, his eyes wide with uncertainty. Clara knelt down, brushing his hair from his forehead, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe. It's over." But hovering in the back of her mind, the remnants of those shadows still lurked, whispering, reminding her of what they had faced, what could always creep back in the soft shadows of her heart. "Mommy, it was scary," Jake whispered, leaning into her. "I know." Clara hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of his small body against hers. "But as long as we have each other, we can face anything." As they embraced, Clara made a silent promise to always protect him, to keep those shadows at bay. They were free now, unchained from the fears of the cursed land, but every step forward would be her own light, a code against the darkness. They would walk together, shaping their future far away from the tales of the lost. Hand in hand, they stepped away from the porch, ready to create a story of love, resilience, and hope, a narrative only they could write. Before they entered the house together, Clara paused for one last glance at Goldfear. The darkness lingered at the periphery, but its grip was loosened. "Goodbye," she whispered, feeling the weight lift with each word, knowing they could finally let go. The future stretched before them, an unwritten tale glimmering brightly in the distance. And now, dear viewers, this is your moment. Don't miss a second of the action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you can stay tuned for more spine-chilling stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more fans like you. Flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and your theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible conclusion. Your support is everything. Show you're a true fan.